We got a special guest for y'all. It's another week. You don't have to be perfect.
I like that.
See who we have in the house today, ladies and gentlemen. He almost made me pull out the suit and jacket, but I didn't want to show him off with my socks today. Yes, sir, ladies and gentlemen. We have in the house the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Tony Ianelli. Welcome to You Don't Have to Be Perfect.
Oh, I love that name. You don't have to be perfect. That's my life, boy. That's my life. Man. You don't have to. Yeah.
I think many business owners, why many people don't start is we think we have to have it all right the first time.
Yeah.
You know, so we started this show to let business owners know you don't have to be perfect. You got to get started, right?
You know, it's funny you would say that. When I first started in the world of business, there were certain executives. This is when I was way back, and I thought they were perfect. You know, just that. And then I realized, okay, they're as human as I am. You know, so but in the beginning, they were on a pedestal. I thought they were like, oh my God, they were perfect, but they were just me. A couple years later, that's all I get. But my whole, I think life in general, I love that you do this. I'm sorry, but I just love that. I think people generally have to know you don't have to be perfect. We all do stuff. We all make mistakes. We all come back. Hopefully we come back. But you know, I made, never mind business, world, personal mistakes. And anyway, you don't have to be perfect.
And I love that you say that, because as the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, people don't realize that Tony Iannelli may not be perfect, right? But you have responsibility.
Not even close.
Right? Even close. So what does it feel like, right, to be the CEO driving the vision for this valley's community of business?
I don't, people ask me sometimes, I don't even know how this happened. I really don't. I don't know how. I seriously almost don't know how I got here. I just feel like God had me. It's funny. I had a business, and I was through some turn of events. I had to sell the business, and I would say to God, don't let this happen. And it just he never saved me, pulled me out of the fire, if you will. And next thing I know, I got this job, and and then we merged all the chambers together, and so. But I don't even know. It's all. I'm not. I know your faith is really important. I think if I'm right, yeah.
Yes.
And I'm not a good church goer, but I got my thing. I don't want to even get emotional about that.
Yes.
I got my thing with God.
Amen.
He's pulled me out of a lot of stuff a lot of times in my life.
And it's funny. I'm the same way. I'm not the best church goer, but I'm big on faith. Right. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I say is important in building a real business is faith.
Yeah.
Right. Because most of the times as business owners, we have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. We're learning along the way. And it's great to have a resource like the Chamber of Commerce, because you've built something that's unique to, I think, other chambers across the country. You know, you've built a risk for our community.
Thank you. I think we tried the real growth about the chamber was the geographic growth that we had. Growing, Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, we're in Pocono, Carbon, Hellertown, Emmaus. So that's the first part. That's the growth of the chamber, but also our diverse chambers, the African American chamber, the Hispanic chamber, the LGBTQ chamber. So a place where everybody feels like, hey, I can I got my crowd, I got my chamber, but that doesn't mean I don't want to be part of the whole thing. So it's so far we say it's very bottom up. So far it's worked out really well, thank God.
And I think that you've done a great job of making the chamber understand now community, right? Because businesses can't be built without community, right? Because those are our customers, those are our patrons, those are our people, and the chamber's done a great job, like you said, with the LGBTQ, the African American, the Latino chamber, all of these little chambers that all feed into what is the greater chamber.
Yeah, if we have our little world. Well, let's take Lehigh Valley. Let's take tonight. I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking, you get down here, I park my car. This is a community. After you get out of your car, you're looking for humans. I mean, there's beautiful buildings, but you want to see humans, and interact and all kinds. So if we're building an economy here in Lehigh Valley, which we have,
Mhm.
thankfully, thank God. I mean, with the right place, the right time. But if we're not lifting, and that's a broad term, lifting every, but really, if we're not everybody doesn't feel part of that. Man, that's not a good future. That's a sad situation.
And I think a lot of it comes from us not understanding and knowing how accessible the chamber is. Like I sit on the events committee for the chamber.
Mhm.
Like people don't realize that, but become a member, right? And then there's opportunity, because you can't complain from the outside, right?
Mhm.
It's easy to throw stones and tell you what you don't do,
Yeah.
right? Well, if you join, right, there are ways to make a difference. The chamber provides opportunity. What do you think?
Yeah. Again, and like we meet, and I would see you at events. All of you are just so sweet and so nice and just good people, and you're going to make the world, the valley, a good place. So if I can interact with you and hang with you, it's going to be a good thing. So.
Yes, because
So when you ask about, for instance, for the interview tonight,
yes,
we get asked about a lot of stuff. Well, I'm not going to say no, because you are who you are.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's funny because me and you have these battles, and I thought about it because I almost ran home to put on my suit.
Oh
Coming
yes.
from community, because me and you have these sock battles. Like no one realizes, right? That Tony has probably one of the most amazing sock collections next to mine. You know, his collection can't beat mine.
I got to pick it up though. I've been like a little bit of neutral. I gotta get some more. Lately, I haven't gotten as many. Wendy, my wife, buys them because I'm very, I'm. I guess I don't want to say cheap. I want to say frugal, but I worry about. I can't spend anything. I can look at two pairs of shoes. 69, 79, 69. I have to leave. You go. You buy it. I tell her to buy it. So anyway, I got to spend some money on socks.
Yes, but and we're always so perfectly coordinated. Like he doesn't just put on the socks. Like when we pull up the suit pant, right? We gotta know that the sock match the suit, match the pocket square.
And that's
As
right down the road here. With the box is CE Roth, and that's where I get my suits. So they're sponsoring my show, they've helped me a lot, helped me look good.
and that's awesome because Business Matters has been doing.
Yeah,
How long have we been on now? 10 years, 20 years,
20. It'll be almost this year. When we start in September, it'll be 22 years.
22
Yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah. I love it.
And you've told so many stories about business in this community. So many necessary stories. You know, how do you pick a story for something like Business Matters?
Well, that's a great question. We'll sit down and say, what's at the top right now, what's important, what's in the news. So we'll do a lot of what are immediate news. I think the three areas: immediate news, what's going on, whatever it could be, transportation, it could be certain piece of legislation. That was the second one. And then we do the debates, a lot of the debates, legislative kind of stuff, and then just general stuff, and shows on being young in the Lehigh Valley, or the LGBT community in Lehigh Valley, African American community business leaders who are, so trying to, just get stuff that's different.
Yes, because it's a great show, and you cover so many different topics, and I think a lot of people miss, right, the intentionality of the show. That's why I wanted to ask, how do you pick? Because when you cut on the show, you know that someone produced this show, someone thought through it to make sure that we got something that we needed for that day.
Yeah.
You know,
And again, you know this. People, everybody has a clicker today. They're going to go buy a show. If it looks interesting, they'll hang. If not, no. One of the things I always say, I try to make sure we have diverse people, diversity of color in the show. And I think a lot of people of color watch, because I hear it often, watch because, in the past, we're not used to having local shows that are diverse. They've been not diverse. But as we've grown, as the community's grown and as our numbers have grown in terms of people of color, who are now the majority of people here in the Valley. So
yes,
yeah,
I mean, Allentown now is a minority majority.
Yeah.
And the chamber's done, I think, a better job than people realize to embrace that. To understand, how to help businesses grow in the Valley. Because it's easy to be an outsider of the Valley and say, I'm going to come to Allentown, because Allentown's different. I don't, even though I say it's the microcosm of America, right? What you see in Allentown, is usually a reflection of what you see in America. And being someone who travels.
No, you're right. It is of the three major cities. It is more representative of what the country looks like.
Yes, and the chamber's done a great job of really embracing that. But how do you think? What do you think we can do better to get people to understand how what's available for them within the chamber? Because I think a lot of businesses are missing it. Right now.
I think we could. I think like everything in this new world in the 21st century, you have to look at yourself and improve. And I think we can do. You remind me that we can do a better job of saying, first of all, we have to make sure we have resources for them, and then I'll tell you when we were at our best during COVID, because we took our own money. We took $250,000 of our own money that we worked hard. That we worked hard. We're not a public entity. We hustle $100,000 every week. But we took that and put it out, and then the counties saw that we did that, and then both Northampton and Lehigh County said, "Look, we're going to put up the same amount. We're gonna." They gave us, I should say, the same amount. We ended up giving out $40 million, almost $50 million during COVID to people that really, really needed it. But so that's a good time for us. And I think now maybe it's time for us to get and maybe do a better job, especially with minority businesses, doing a better job of saying, how can we help you? How can we give you access? The big thing in this universe is access. Access. You've got you've lived your whole life. You got a friend that's got a job at a bank and he's gone up the ladder, and you're starting something, you need a $150,000 loan or something. Okay. If you're new and you don't have access, or that is access, I should say. If you don't have it, not so much fun.
Yeah, and no, what the chamber does a great job of is creating networking opportunities, right? Because people is the real capital. Who you know, and who's willing,
especially in this valley.
Yes, and who's willing to co-sign you in the room, right? I've been blessed before this interview, outside of just having, minor interaction. People who will tell you, "Hey, Pat, good guy."
Yep.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
Tony's a good guy. You may not have given him a fair shake, because I'm tough on anyone, especially because I say poverty is violence. So outside of running my company, which is a for-profit, people don't realize, because we spend so much time fighting in the nonprofit world, right? So we're tough on anyone who we don't think is helping poverty. But we realized real quickly in a couple of lunches that wasn't your stance, and I just needed to learn.
A lot of people, a lot of us are very blessed, and particularly, I'm talking about with wealth now, in generational wealth. And if you don't have generational wealth, I think of real estate. That's housing is one that really gets me. Look, if you have a dad or whatever, grandfather, they're going to give you a couple $100,000 to buy a house. You're in good shape. But if you don't, it's so expensive today. And how can you? I always say, how can you for say a young African American guy climbing up the ladder, uh, trying to make a living, how can you feel this is, or the best way for you to feel this is your country is own a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't ever own a piece of it, if that stretches so far, that one worried me a little bit.
Yes. I love that you're talking about ownership because I think one of the things that I tell people, even if you're going to work a job your whole life, because I'm not against, W-2 workers, right? Have some type of ownership because you can't pass your job down to your kids. Generational
Good
wealth doesn't
point.
always have to be a lot of money, right? But to pass down a way for them to be able to earn. You know, Unfortunately, being a black man, I realize that 99% of black families, when they die, leave their kids absolutely nothing. $0 and 0 cents. You
It's
know,
unfair.
Unfair when you go into other,
Yeah.
communities, you may not get that much, but you get something, right? So being able,
And some get a lot. Believe me, I
some,
see it. Some get a
mm-hmm,
whole lot.
yes,
When you say you take it as violence, do you think that the how do I put this, a consciousness that nobody wants to see that this is way out of whack, this is unfair?
yes. So poverty is a two thing, right? So there's poverty is a mindset, first of all, right? And I can say that simply because my mom was a welfare mother. I am a privileged kid. I graduated from Raven Academy. I was the first black kid to go to and graduate from Raven Academy. I have a degree from Lehigh University, you know, but I was a drug dealer,
Wow.
because
How did you feel? Because back when you went, how many years ago did you go to Moravian?
I
What
graduated in 1993.
what was there any? You must there
I
wasn't
was
much diversity there.
No, so my first day of Moravian Academy, there was one other black person, and she at that time didn't like black boys.
Oh wow!
So I
See,
went from being the man in Harlem, just winning championships, playing for the biggest basketball team in New York City, where everyone knows your name, to no one cares because it's not even basketball season. You know,
is that why you
so
got to Moravian for
yeah,
basketball?
yeah, got his
Wow.
basketball scholarship, and
So
I had good grades.
did you have day? Oh wow! Did you have days that we were like, man, this is can I do this?
My first month at Moravian Academy, a group of kids decided that they were gonna run the nigger out,
Mm.
you know, and it was okay, because I was a little tougher than they thought, but I was a scrawny kid. I got to Moravian Academy. I was 4'9", 75 pounds.
You're a never
So
give up guy.
yeah, I was little and feisty, and I got into a little fight. I got to beat up, one of the tough guys who
Mm-hmm.
everyone was afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
And that took a little pressure off my back. And then I could play. My family's from the islands, and I was super fast back
Mm-hmm.
then, so I played a little soccer.
Mm.
And so, being an athlete, you know,
But did you have
allowed
some
me.
people that did embrace you and
Oh,
became
oh
friends?
man. So great thing is, right? Uh, Rob Bass had a song back in the days where he said, it's called "It Takes Two," and it said, "Ladies love me, girls adore me." Right? Right. So yeah,
Yeah, so you had a
I,
good.
I did well. I was an athlete. I've
And then you
always
went to
been.
Lehigh.
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah, I got a degree in international relations from
smart
Lehigh.
man.
So
That's one thing I'm not proud of. I didn't go anywhere. I never. We had a family business when I was. We thought we'd. I thought we'd be working in the family business when I was a senior in high school. My father lost his business. We lost everything. We lost our house. We lost everything, and we got kicked out of our home and started from scratch. But anyway, I never went anywhere. So for me to be where I'm at is an absolute miracle.
and that's so. I
One more
hit.
absolute.
Listen to that, right? Because everyone thinks you got to have the education. So my mom education was the escape. I grew up in Harlem,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so Harlem in the 80s. Like when they see us, I knew you. I've known Yusef. I know Antron. Like I grew up with them. So Harlem in the 80s was sort of rough. So my mom saw I could dribble a basketball and I had really good grades. I was the smartest kid in school, right? So she
So
leveraged
you're
that.
talking about a team in Harlem. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but this is fascinating. So you're talking about a basketball team in Harlem. You're
Yeah.
talking about really good,
Yeah,
really.
I played for the Gauchos, so the Gauchos was the best team, and
Gotcha.
so Stephon Marbury, Kenny
Oh
Anderson,
my gosh.
like all the Jamal Mashburn. We can name the NBA players that I played with, against, and were on the
Who's the
team.
best you ever played against? The biggest
Uh the
NBA player.
the biggest NBA player that we ever got to play against probably was a young Grant Hill.
Oh
In the
wow.
AAU.
Yeah.
Yeah, during the AAU. Yeah, we we were great. And just being a part of greatness. Like my guy, Wally was Pee Wee Kirkland's,
Wow.
son. That's Pee Wee Kirkland's son. So that's who I grew up competing against.
And then you go to Lehigh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was,
That's hysterical. I mean, talk about a shift.
yeah,
From Harlem to Lehigh. It's
yeah. And
that's.
my mom was on welfare the whole time. So just, I
I mean,
remember
you were in two worlds.
two different worlds. I remember, and then I had a son early. I had my son my sophomore year in college. I remember my sophomore year in college, all the kids were going on spring break. And they say, Paz, where are you going for spring break? And I go, UCLA. No, look, you're going to California. I'm like, no, University on the corner of Lexington Avenue. I got to sell these drugs to get back here next semester. And they're like, what? I'm like, my life and your life is different. Like, my son's mom was at Lehigh. I was at Lehigh. Like,
Oh.
I'm hustling to keep us through. Like, she couldn't fail. It wasn't her fault she got pregnant. You know what I mean? We both had to graduate. So we
And you
were,
did graduate.
yeah, definitely 97, and she graduated in
Did
98.
you ever get busted?
Of course,
Oh.
and it's the best thing that happened, right?
Yeah.
Because I deal with young gang members. I deal with um, kids that are coming home from prison outside of having our corporate clients, right? So in the nonprofit world, we deal with, who people would normally throw away,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But I graduated from Raven Academy. I graduated from Lehigh University. None of them would believe my mom was on welfare. The struggle was real if I didn't get caught.
How did you? How did you? I'm sorry, but I've become the
Yeah.
interviewer. But I'm just curious. How did you? I just picture you leaving Lehigh, where there's students with tremendous wealth, all had cars, and the wealth. You
Yes,
saw it,
sir.
and even your food there was the best probably. And then you have to drive home on the weekend or whatever holidays to a whole different world. How was that? Well, how do you reconcile that?
So, and it's
I don't
so,
mean that you shouldn't or couldn't,
no,
but I'm
no.
just wondering how
no.
you're like, what the heck?
So what
Where
was
do I
so
belong?
no, what was so funny during that time, I used to always tell my friends in the streets that you're smarter than all the kids I'm in school with,
Mm.
because you have to calculate on a dime. Your life is on the line, you know. Their lifestyles was so different.
So you would know better than anybody. There's incredible intelligence, opportunity, future in places that we're not fostering. I guess you use that term.
Exactly. Which is why I invite people like you to those places, right? Um, one of the things I tell young drug dealers, right? So, no one ever wants to admit they made a mistake. So I start with my own, right?
Good.
So I ask, how many people ever sold drugs? No one's going to raise their hands, right? So I raised mine. I said I was probably one of the bigger marijuana dealers on the East Coast at one time. I brought Girl Scout cookie to the East Coast. So if you smoke it, thank me. So then people start to raise their hand. I'm like, so you understand distribution,
Mm.
right? I asked them, how many of you ever wear a flag in your back pocket to represent your gang? You know, you understand branding, right? How many of you have little homies that are in your set? You understand high level, high intensity management because your life is on the line, right? So your big homies didn't teach you wrong; they just didn't teach you correctly,
Mhm.
right? There's a difference between wrong and correctly, right? They taught you some of the things you needed to know, but they only taught you how they knew it. If you take those same skills, those same principles that you grew up on, and apply it to business, you're unstoppable because you're built in integrity. right? Because can't steal, can't lie, could be your life,
Yeah.
right? You're built in
Yeah.
integrity,
Yeah.
right? You make sure that everyone around you also has some type of integrity. Because when we sell drugs, we don't sell drugs because we want to be drug dealers. Most of us sell drugs out of need, desperation, and a way of change.
Hmm.
You know, and then you get caught up. You know, because then the money gets to be too good, and that's how you get caught up, right? Because then you become addicted to the lifestyle. So the drug dealer becomes just as addicted as the drug user,
Mm. To
right?
the money.
To the
To
money,
the money.
and the way that it comes in,
Hmm.
right? So it becomes a whole different thing. So John Assaraf, if you ever seen the movie The Secret,
No.
it's a movie about the law of attraction, big movie about the law of attraction. One night we were at dinner, and he said, because I always question,
Hmm.
you know, how
Sure.
come even though I was in, like you said, one world, why did I choose the other, right? Before it clicked, right? And he says, you don't see with your eyes, you see with your brain, but you only see what you've been trained to see.
Mm.
So the drug dealer in my neighborhood, when I was growing up, was a good guy because they still did family outings. The drug dealers in my neighborhood, bought turkeys on Thanksgiving. They bought Christmas for the kids that were in need. Of course, they did violent things because that's also that world.
Mm.
But they didn't show that to me. I was a basketball player. I was a
Yeah.
kid with some potential. You know, they
Sure.
would they would bet thousands of dollars
Yeah,
on
that
my
buys you a lot
game.
of credibility.
Yeah, you know, I'm I'm a
Isn't
Rucker
it,
Park legend.
isn't it
So
funny when you're a really good athlete? It really, again, I don't know. It's at that phase of your life, you really looked up to.
it changes your trajectory, right?
But then the problem is, a lot of time, if that's your only thing you got going, because we've all seen that,
Hmm.
that where some people keep going up, up the ladder, if you will, and some people not so much. So it's hard to reconcile that you're not that who you used to be.
Yeah. Um, 50 Cent also has a good line. He said, "Damn, homie, in high school you was the man, homie. What happened to you? Like don't get caught up. Like yesterday is gone. I mean, I could give you a million yesterdays would tell you that I was an amazing person, and a million yesterdays that show you I was awful.
Yeah, yeah, that could be.
Right?
I think we
But
all have those
you
if we're
know, we-
honest.
but you know, today is the only thing that matters, right? Because we live in the present,
Yeah.
and that's a gift.
I used to have a chair. One of my boys used to call me chum all the time. Chum, you can't go back to summer camp. He used to meaning that as much as you got that memory, you can't go back. You want to go
Yes.
back, but you can't go back. Yeah.
Yes. So I thank God for the mistakes, right? And I thank God for your honesty that you didn't have the same education and you're leading at such an amazing way. Like I said, all I've been blessed, not just me, all of my brothers and sisters are highly educated because that was my mother's way out. She said, you know, my one brother is the general manager for Hertz Rental Car. He's the only one that has a job. Right? He's the general manager for Hertz Rental Car. My baby brother's a world renowned juggler. He saved the Big Apple Circus, with his skill,
Hmm.
But he also has a degree in business.
Hmm.
Because my mom said, yeah, you can juggle all you want, but you better have something to fall back on, right? Because like you said, what happens when the athletic skill runs out? What happens when the physical skill runs out? What happens to you? So I'm so grateful to know about your humble beginnings, right? The family business went wrong. You didn't get the what people think is higher education, but you got life education. Because I think that's so much more important, right?
Yeah.
Life experiences.
I got a job on the assembly line at Mack Truck for my first 3 years. So I put tires on trucks because I'm not very mechanically inclined.
Me
And I
neither.
remember I had a supervisor. I just started there. I had to get a job. We lost everything. And he said, "Do you have any idea what you're doing here?" And I said, "No, I have no idea." He said, "Come with me." And that was the only job. You pick up a tire, you put on a truck, and And so that's what I did. So when you think of, I don't know, again, sometimes where you start, I don't know. I just thank God. I don't know how it happened, but
I
I'll
I,
take it.
I think in hearing your story, your humble beginnings is why you care for the businesses so much.
I have uh, so I grew up Catholic, but for a bit I went to an evangelical, and everybody had a piece of scripture, had a their verse, and I never did, but I finally found one. It just jumped out anyway. So it's I never know the number, First Peter, so, but it's I don't want to get emotional saying it, but it means a lot to me. Humble yourself under God's mighty hand, and He will lift you up in His time. So just chill, humble yourself, and
I am I am 100% with that scripture right there, because it's never about us. The way I always say, not about us, but through us, they get to see God's glory. Right? We're just His humble reflection. Right? We all have a part to play. You know,
we're very. One thing I learned: we're very imperfect.
definitely.
Yeah, I mean, in a great human way.
Yes.
I've been to churches where people knew all the scripture, but maybe not so much about love and caring. So anyway, we're all human. So we all make
Yes.
mistakes.
Yes. And what I love so much about this is that you would misjudge, right? If we walked into a room, right, and we said, who was the Lehigh grad, right?
Yeah, that's
Right?
true.
And
Yeah,
who
pick it right
wasn't,
now.
right?
Yeah,
Right?
that's
They,
so funny. Yeah,
they would,
circle. If you were like in a book, circle the Lehigh grad. I guess.
yes,
Yeah,
they would easily pick you, right? And and it's so wonderful, right, for someone to know
I'll pick it.
that,
The white guy in the suit.
yes. Right? And it's so wonderful to know that you don't need that. You can get it. You
Yeah,
should get
yeah.
it
If you can, boy,
if you
please.
can, if that enhances your life, if that makes you feel good, right? Because now with um the way the world has changed, I always tell kids, get great mentorship. If you can get a great
Yeah,
mentor.
I was going to say that's a really good point. That's who put was humans, if you will, people,
Hmm.
meaning people. Then you started to do this. You met someone else, and so many times I've gotten opportunities because not so, every time because of people. Because I didn't have a piece of paper that would give me the opportunity. It was always people. Give me a
Always,
break.
always. I tell people the two most important things in life are people, right, and information, right, and applicable information, because we can learn a whole bunch of nonsense,
Mm-hmm.
but information that you can apply to your life or your dream, and people that want to help you make it happen,
Yeah.
right? Because it doesn't matter what, where we get caught up a lot of times is color, and I think what blessed me at Moravian Academy is that I was um, coming from such a humble beginning. Um, and then I've gotten to be embraced by such wealth.
Moravian Academy.
You
Did you
know,
play at Lehigh basketball?
just 1 year, and then I
Okay.
got hurt.
Uh,
Um,
did you play at Moravian?
yeah, I played, all 4 years. So
Oh.
yeah, I got
Were you
recruited.
good?
Yeah, I was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's funny. JB Riley,
Yeah.
his daughter was at Moravian Academy. This year my nephew, 30 years later, was the star point guard from Moravian Academy. So
Wow.
you know, but before they redesigned the new gym, I would tell JB Riley, I said, tell your daughter stop staring at my picture. He's like, what? I was like, my picture's in the
Wow.
gym. I was athlete of the year. He's like, so and then he walks in and said,
You were a Moravian Academy. I was an Allen, William Allen. I was an Allen guy.
yeah, I mean, it was, and again, I thank my mom, right, because we didn't have the finances to be there. We didn't have anything that would have said I would have been at Moravian Academy, other than my mother happened to attend the Moravian church, and Moravian Academy was looking to diversify. So they were
Wow.
going across different Moravian churches to find a black kid that they can bring
Yeah.
here to, you know,
That was you.
plug and play, and I had the grades in the athletics,
Well,
so they
that's
can
another point. You
justify.
never know what's going to get you there or who's
Yeah,
going to get you there.
yeah,
Sometimes it's not the traditional way. So you never know.
not at
Um,
all. And then what's so great is what you said is people, right? Because what Moravian Academy allowed me to do in the Lehigh Valley is some of the people I've known since high school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Judge Cohen, I've known since high school. You know, his
Wow. These are
his
all people you went
yeah
to school with.
yeah his wife, her older brother was my forward. You know, on the basketball team.
What
You
was it
know,
like? What was it like when you got your degree at Lehigh? I mean, did you go up on the stage? Did you
yeah,
really? What was
well,
that like?
it was surreal for my mother,
Oh,
right?
good.
Because it,
She was. Is your mother
yeah,
still alive
yeah,
today?
yeah. My
Oh,
mother's still
good. So
alive
she
today.
saw you
Yeah,
graduate.
that
Wow.
was her dream,
Wow.
right? So to fulfill her dream, you know, was amazing, because
Did she
um
cry?
of
Because I'm almost crying
that,
already.
yeah,
Oh wow.
because it also gave my brothers the um the option and the incentive to go, because if I could do it, they could do it, and then it also became, so Moravian Academy, what it became was a dream place for a lot of my friends,
Mm.
right? Because I can bring them from Harlem,
Yeah.
into my dorm, and
Oh my
you
God. They
can
must have been like.
you can come, and and we didn't have any parents there, so we lived in a dorm. We had teachers who, you know
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
What do you mean,
funny.
like during holidays or whatever? If you stayed there
I
or
stayed there all. I lived there. I
yeah
lived at
yeah.
Moravian Academy,
But
so I would bring my friends up on weekends. They can come stay
yeah.
with me for
It
the
was
weekend.
nice.
Yeah, because if you go there now, they turned which is terrible. They turned the boys' dorm into storage, and they turned the girls' dorm into the art center.
Oh.
So that beautiful art center by the soccer field was the girls' dorm, and the boys' dorm was that ugly piece of storage
Mm.
over there by the
But it
lacrosse
had
field.
its charm, right? I
But
bet.
back then, it was amazing.
I bet. I bet.
Um, it's funny.
Wow.
I
What
was
a life.
I was just talking to a minute ago. My consulting company was talking about a major sugar deal that we're going to do with a couple countries. You know, and it's funny. I was like, yeah, I need to call my friend in Panama. They're like, Panama? Like, yeah, my roommate from Moravian Academy happened to winded up becoming the head of
You
Bank
know,
of Panama.
I was with someone the other day. You talk about a crazy story, and they said someone that went to Villanova, and I said, "Do you know who his roommate was?" And I said, "No, it was the Pope." So the Pope was his, who went to Villanova. So
That's
crazy.
awesome, right? And it's just relationships, right? You
That's a
know,
big time relationship.
yes, yes, to be able to call the Pope, you know. Like I was at Lehigh when Dan Quayle was the
Oh,
vice president and Tucker was a classmate. So I was in there with
oh,
Tucker Quayle.
oh, that's right. Was
Yeah,
there like a drama about that? Anyway, I don't know.
yeah, Tucker Quayle.
There was something he went to.
He went to Lehigh. I
And
mean,
it was whatever.
yeah. I mean, we all were pot smokers,
Oh,
and
okay.
guys, uh, and got themselves, and it was funny because you got Secret Service around, and you
Oh
don't
yeah.
notice that, he's the vice president's son. There's always Secret Service around, But Lehigh again was a different world because again, my mom wasn't past the struggle. She was just pushing us past it,
Wow.
to have such a big vision. That's
Would she
why.
come to visit you?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
she would come to visit when she could,
Yeah. Which
but
probably wasn't much
very,
often.
not very often. Her big visit was graduation.
Yeah.
To see it all come into the culmination of me actually walking across that stage at inside
At Lehigh, you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, and what we graduated 6,000 people.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and to hear my name, to get that diploma, was huge, for my mom, because she saw something that no one else saw, right? She saw her boys being successful when no one else could. She saw her boys being educated. My brother, who actually has a learning disorder, is the only one of us that graduated valedictorian of his high school. Like, because my mother had a vision. She's like, I'm like, that's the one with the learning disorder graduated valedictorian. And he went to a public school. It's still different, but again, he did 1 year at Moravian Academy. He's like, this is not for me. My mom let him go home. And I want to go home. He's like, no, you have to finish. But again, he still made friends at Moravian Academy in that 1 year that are lifelong. Like, because his freshman year was the year that Zach and Jenny came in, who's Zach's wife. Bobby Vidoni. I gotta call him Robert now. Robert Vidoni, who's city controller for Bethlehem. These are
wow. And these were all people that these are your classmates. Wow.
Yeah, these are his classmates because Robert.
Oh, his. Okay.
Yeah, my classmates were John F.C. from J.E. Berger, the Davis family, who now are
you said Judge Cohen, right?
Judge Cohen.
Yeah.
I was really in there with Judge Van Antwerpen's oldest son.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I had Franklin was my classmates. Most of my class actually left the valley and became big people across the world, like big names in Google and Meta. Like I said, my high school roommate became the president of Bank of Panama. But like, one day I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm flying in on a private helicopter. I'm like, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I can't believe you're the president of Bank of Panama. And it was just, those silly relationships became fruitful relationships later because, no matter what mistakes I made, because like I said, there were times I was a violent drug dealer, which also was necessary, and I say it was necessary because those are times of integrity and different things that allows me to now deal with a group to provide hope, right? Because every business that we open up in that world, we break a generational curse, right? Every time, we get to give a young person hope. He wasn't a drug dealer, but I had a young man, who was, they thought could have gone down the wrong path. Right now, recently he's gotten before he graduated from high school. He already had $10,000 in grant money, made another 10 grand in his business, and now has a way out. Hope for the family, a vision, right? And we get to provide that. But if all you know is the Moravian Academy, if all you know is the Lehigh University, you don't know the struggle.
Yeah.
Right? And there was a struggle during that time.
Yeah, you've seen you've seen the whole gamut. That's they talk about an education.
And when we talk about what's so crazy about it the most, right, is for no one to stand. So when I'm in the hood, they don't understand what I'm dealing with at Moravian Academy. When I'm at Moravian Academy, they definitely don't understand.
Yeah, I'm just picturing the first day you show up to school at Moravian. You must have been like, okay, let me try and figure this out.
My first day at Moravian Academy, everyone had on no less than J. Crew. Polo, like the horse. Just my mom had me a brand new polyester suit from Alexander. I said, I can't wear this. Like, I can't. Like, no. Like, everything you bought me, we have to throw it in the garbage. She's like, what? I said, I can't go to one class like this. Like, my mom bought me, I think, 12 polyester pants, and no one at Moravian had polyester. Like, they had the finest linen, the best cotton, and these pants, she had creased them so well that they pointed in the front. So it was the worst, So, immediately had to find a way. But it was also a real dichotomy, right? Because we talk about drug dealing, drug using, right? Disposable incomes with young people, young people with disposable incomes and not the right guidance.
Yeah.
Like First time I heard about an e-pill was at Moravian Academies.
Mhm.
You know, when someone's like, "Can you get me an e-pill?" I said, "What is that? Hold on, let me make a phone call. Do we know? Can we get e-pills?" Yes. Here we go. You know, disposable incomes. So I learned a lot. Um, Actually, some of my friends back then, you know, they said the only difference between my getting caught and their getting caught was their parents,
Mhm.
right? My getting caught meant a public defender. Them getting caught meant a real lawyer, right? So life situations, you know, but
And boy, that makes a big difference in the
a
universe. You
huge
had
difference.
the DA on. I don't know if you got to talk to
Yeah,
him.
yes, yes,
Who said you were great, by the way.
yes,
But that makes a huge, huge, huge difference. Just like docs,
yes,
really, really good doc can do certain things. Doctor,
yes,
really, really good lawyer can do stuff. Can
yes.
work magic
You know,
if you can afford it,
if you can
and you
afford it.
couldn't.
And at that time I couldn't,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I had all of the access, right? And that's the you know, that's what where, you know, the scales are imbalanced, right? Because it looks like you're in that world,
Yeah.
right? But the reality checks, and it wasn't, and again, it wasn't the color, right? And people were like, oh, it was because you're black. No, it's
No,
because I was poor,
economics. Yeah, economics.
right? Because I was poor,
Yeah.
right? And it wasn't even poor economically, also, right? Poor mentally, right? That's why I say poverty is violence, right? When you're in that world, to think bigger, you know. That's why my mom's my biggest hero, because for her to think big in the middle of war infested Harlem,
But
you
you
know,
lived it.
yeah,
Is it hard to think big some in that world?
in that world for
Yeah.
her, yeah,
No, but for you as a kid, not for you because you, but for your friends, is it hard?
it would.
You're in
So you
that
got to
world.
think about it. Most of my friends are coming home from 25 to 27-year jail pits, like st- enormous potential stolen. You know, some of it for stuff that we are now legally allowed to sell. You know, I have a friend who was given a double kingpin charge for selling marijuana. He lost 25 years of his life for selling marijuana, something we legally sell in the dispensary.
Yeah, New
You
Jersey.
know, so there are, you know, there are things, people, places, you know, where I have a friend now, 72 years old. He is Nicky Barnes. So if you ever seen the movie American Gangster, Nicky Barnes is the character Cuba Gooding Jr. played in that
Yeah,
movie.
yeah, sure.
He's Nicky Barnes' youngest cousin.
Mhm.
You know, 72 years old, spent 45 years in prison.
Wow. How many years
Seven,
do you say?
45 years in prison. You know, for silliness. 25 years in prison for a rape that he didn't commit because he was black. She was European, and her parents had money that didn't match
Mm.
in 1973.
Yeah.
You know, in 2025, because of this rape charge, that he can't, it's been almost impossible for him to get the health care coverage he needs because that charge still comes up and makes him look dangerous.
Yeah.
72 years old, you know, stage 4 cancer, you know, but he looks, according to paper, dangerous. See, if I didn't have my slight hiccups, I may not have understood his story,
Mhm.
you know, because even though my parents had struggle, I grew up in privilege.
Yeah.
You know, my struggle had privilege, right? Because I can still, you know, I dated wealthy girls, you know, while I went home to poverty. You know, they, you know, I was there, you know, I was there.
I think she's saying it's past. It's getting
Yeah,
past my bedtime.
yeah, we're actually at the end. So I want to make sure that we close tightly, but um, we were able to, and I think what you showed us on the other side was, what does the dream look like, right? My mother's dream was to have educated sons that can choose and pick and choose to go wherever we want. You know, um, I fit anywhere. Right? I'm like that Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
fit anywhere because I'm a drug dealer. Fortunately and unfortunately, I have a degree. Fortunately, right? I've been in different places, so no matter where you are, I relate to you.
Yeah.
You know, and I thank my mother for providing that dream, but I thank you, right, for providing a different dream for someone today, because no one would have realized, right? Like I said, when we walk in the room, they ask, "Who's the Lehigh grad?" No one would have thought Tony. You know, for you to say,
No
oh,
grad.
yeah, who's the no grad? Who's the humble beginnings guy? Who's the guy who had to work? And we both had to work our way up because my mom didn't give me a silver
Sure.
spoon.
Yeah.
She gave me what was her advantage, education, right? You had to work to build your dream, which wasn't perfect, right? To be where you are now. And I thank you for being open, honest, for someone else to be able to dream big too.
Thank you. It's been great. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah,
Probably a different direction than we thought, but we got to talk about stuff that I think that's important. So
yeah. I think
it's
we
easy to
talked.
talk about the superficial. Always try anyway. It is easy to do that,
Yeah,
and there's more meaning. Uh, I don't know. It's just stuff that we need to work on.
this is the conversation we needed to have, right? You know, because someone needed to know not only can they be Paz Simpson and go from a welfare mom to, getting these educational opportunities, but they also can be Tony Iannelli because he did it without it.
Yeah, but you should have it.
You should have
We
it.
both said
We're
that.
not pushing no one
I
away
just
from
yeah.
it,
I
but you made it
I don't
without it.
know how.
So, they don't ever have to give up. A good friend of mine has a song, Christian Curate has a song called Never Give Up, right? And you didn't let what you didn't have, right, write the story of what you could,
Yeah.
right? And no one would know you didn't have it with that cool, pocket square and, the second
The
best
look.
sock collection in the Lehigh Valley,
My
you
wife
know.
likes this beard thing. I think it makes me look old. She's like, oh, I think that's nice. I don't know. Anyway,
You're looking good,
I
bro.
was on vacation with my family. I shaved.
So what was the brother guy for Miami Vice? I'm feeling especially with what with the beard, not Crockett, it was Crockett, yeah, because Tubbs was the black guy. So you got the Crockett look, it looks good on you, and it feels wonderful to have you. So I want to make sure you get to tell anyone anything you want them to look for, either in your life or in the chamber, before we sign off, and do what we normally do.
Well, I don't know. I guess for me, yeah, I maybe this is it. I don't even, that's a broad question, which I like, by the way. But maybe for me is you just never know. Maybe what I'm thinking right now is you never know the impact you can have on people, and that one's is big. You never know. Just being nice to someone can lift them up and make them feel good. Saying hello, or opening a door, or getting them a job, or calling them if they have a. I don't know. I mean, you just never know how much impact you can have on people. And I think sometimes I feel in the world today, I wish we had more interaction, like maybe because electronic, but
Mm-hmm.
more interaction. Like you touching, how you doing? Are you okay?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so maybe that's it. We're, just never underestimate, and how good it'll make you feel. How good it comes back when you reach out to other people.
And that's awesome. So, Tony, I'm going to ask you to do with me what we've asked all of our guests to do before we sign off, and that's say my personal manifesto. I'm going to say it all the way through, so don't worry about remembering it or repeating it, because I'll give you a call and response to repeat it. So, my personal manifesto is simple: is I love me, I'm worthy, Some people may not like me, but I don't care because the people that matter will be glad that I'm here. So I'm going to give you a call and response to make it easy. I love me.
I love me.
I'm worthy.
I'm worthy.
Some people may not like me,
Some people may not like me,
but I don't care
but I don't care
because the people that matter
because the people that matter
will be glad that I'm here.
will be glad that I'm here.
And I'm glad you took this time with us, Tony, that you were able to be open with us, right? Because you inspired someone to dream. I'm glad that we were able to make you comfortable enough to tell us about your humble beginnings. Because someone today is going to know that I don't have to be perfect, but man, please just get started. I'm grateful that you built such a wonderful chamber of commerce, that's embraced not just me and my family, but so many other families. And I'm grateful that you were here. So I'm going to give you the final word before we sign off.
Could I say it any better than what you just said? You're as good as it gets. So I guess I'll close with this. I'm glad that I came. I'm glad that I'm here, and I'm glad we got to share.
And Tony, thank you. We were blessed to have it. And if you are not a member of the Greater Chamber of Commerce, please join us. If you didn't know why before, now you know why. We love this. Guys, our trusty leader. We're doing some great things over there. You can do some great things with us. So this is Paz Simpson. This was another episode of You Don't Have to Be Perfect. And next week we have Mr. Des Prosper on. So join us because we have some great things coming. Peace. And